Hello, and welcome to Safe Space, a new show dedicated to people from Caribbean backgrounds and descent in the LGBTQ community. I'm your host, Chris Edwards, and I'll be here to navigate and introduce you to new guests every week. We'll explore their journey, story of how they've gotten to this place in their lives, describe what it's taken, the courage, the ups and the downs, and everything in between. My first guest is no stranger to me, social media, and has no problem telling his story. He's a friend and originally hails from Jamaica, the West Indies, like myself, but currently resides in Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my first guest, Mr. Madeline. What's up, Alec? How you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Chris?
I'm well. So, welcome to the show. And as you know, for those that don't know, this is the pilot episode, and you are the first guest. So, welcome.
It really is a special honor. So happy that you have me here.
Well, thank you so much. And in full disclosure, for those that do not know, Alec and I are friends. We met through Instagram, and I actually interviewed them for one of my Instagram lives back on Valentine's Day earlier this year. So that's how we became friends. Our husbands are friends, and we've hung out together in over this past year. So it's really an honor to have you here to launch this show for me.
It's crazy to believe that we've only known each other less than a year. I'll just putting that out there.
I know. February of next year will be 1 year, but we've come a long way in a year, right?
Right.
Listen, we have a lot in common, and one of the things that we have in common is we are from Jamaican descent, Jamaican backgrounds. We were both born in Jamaica, the West Indies. You just recently left within the last couple of years. I actually am a transplant. I left when I was 3 years old. So there's a huge difference. But the reason why you're here today and the reason why we're on this platform is Safe Space is a platform where I would love to have people come and tell their story, living in the community, the LGBTQ community, being of a Caribbean descent, because we know that it's a lot different for us as people from the Caribbean. We grew up with a different background, very strict, very religious. So that journey of, allowing ourselves to be who we are is kind of tough. And I, would love for you to tell your story of how you've gotten to this point in your life.
Whenever somebody asks that question, it's always like, where do I start from?
Yeah.
Because I feel like the story has so many layers, and I can't even say chapters. It has volumes.
Well, you know what? Let's start with volume one.
Okay. For me, I feel like for many other people, I've known for as long as I can remember that there was something that was a little bit different about me. I can take it as far back as 9, 10, where it is that I actually question things. And I think in my older age, looking back now, I can probably even see patterns earlier than that, where, I could have possibly seen that I'm one of those people who was born gay. So I identify as gay currently, but I would have had to navigate the path to actually getting to that point.
Yeah.
Actually accepting that title, because like many, I would have gone through the phases of having girlfriends and having that interest in women first, which was emotional and physical at one point. Then it was just emotional, and then when I found everything in one package, that's when I was just like, okay, I feel like this is where I can settle and I don't need anything else. And that would have been after I had my first boyfriend.
Okay.
I think that was at the age of 17 that I had my first boyfriend. So I think at that point, I can say I was comfortable in personally accepting what my sexuality was.
Okay. Now, fully accepting it at the age of 17, but I know you had inklings or really questioned who you were earlier on. So around what age would you say that you knew something was like very different?
I think when it really smacked me in the face that it was something I had to actually address within myself was probably around the age of 10. And I think that's right before I was about to go into high school. I went to an all-boys school, so that also didn't make it any easier.
Yeah.
And to be honest, at that point, there was nobody I felt like I could have a conversation like that with. So it was a lot of introspection, which was extremely difficult. The only gay representation I had ever seen at that point was on TV in the form of like Will and Grace, where it's always a comedy. And then I think the first time where I saw a real experience of something that related to or was like parallel to an experience in my life was through the show Degrassi. So not sure if anybody knows what that show is, but it Canadian show. Drake used to be on that show. That's where he got his.
Okay.
But there was a character, Marco, who was a new character, season 3, I think it was, and it was their first gay character on the show. And you got to see him navigating that same exact picture that I had in my life, where it is that you were trying to have girlfriends because everybody else around you was having girlfriends, but then you still had that attraction, an attraction that you were afraid to act on for several reasons. And seeing that play out on TV, I was just like, wow, okay, so maybe this isn't so weird. Maybe I'm not alone. Because for this to be on TV, it must mean that there are other people there with a similar experience.
Right. So I want to address that, but I want to kind of step back a little bit because you said something that was really important. Seeing the representation on TV allowed you to feel as though you weren't alone. But before you start to even see other people who you could identify with on TV, let's go back into your home life. And what was that experience of, being with family, family events, and then just knowing that you're different and not knowing how to express yourself, or also even like the fear of them finding out who you truly are?
I think when it comes to family events, I didn't have any grouses with how I felt there until much later in life. I think in those initial stages of me questioning my sexuality, I was still very much a boy, So when you went to family events, it was all about playing with cousins, or you didn't think at that point that somebody wouldn't love me anymore because I was different. But then I also knew enough to know it's not something I should bring up.
Right. Right.
So I think when it really became apparent is when I started in relationships, because at that point, everybody else my age was also in relationships, but they would bring somebody to a family dinner, and of course, I would never dare do the same. And I think that's when those feelings started to develop, where I felt that I had to exclude people from my life and be extremely private.
Okay, so let's go back into when you said you first had your first boyfriend at 17. Now you have someone who you identify with, who you want to be with. How does that work and how does that happen? Because like now family functions, functions outside with other people. Like, how do you navigate that space, especially being in Jamaica, because you're still living in Jamaica then? And for those that don't know, talk a little bit about like the legalities of living in Jamaica and being in the LGBT community.
Okay, so in Jamaica, and I think this goes for the entire Caribbean, you do have the buggery law that's still in place. So it technically is illegal to be gay in those spaces, because if you're considering everything that comes with it, then if you're blocking out one part of the experience, you're essentially telling me that I don't have a space here. In terms of navigating relationships and all of that, it almost feels like a don't ask, don't tell kind of policy. And even when it is that people can tell that this is what the situation is, or suspect that this is what the situation is, nobody really asks questions directly to me, or at least that wasn't my experience. They would talk about it with everybody else, and it would eventually get back to me. And that was okay with me, And it was only okay with me because that's what it is that I knew. And it felt like, if this was the way that I could have my cake and eat it too, I'll take whatever version of that I could get. I didn't find it difficult in the initial stages, when it came to dating, only because once I found my first boyfriend, I really didn't have my eyes anywhere else. So it's not like I was out there looking. It's something that really, truly just happened for two young guys who, um, I feel like at that point I was not questioning. I feel like at that point he was.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's initially how it happened, but we were just two friends. And
Of
even
course, I
when
know
we're in a
that.
relationship, we're still just two friends.
Friends or roommates or what, one of
And
those
then,
type
you
of.
have sleepovers, and
Yeah.
then,
But
it's you're just best friends now.
yeah. But how do you navigate that? Like, how do you go out? How did you go out? How did you interact with people in social settings, um, with your boyfriend or quote unquote your best friend?
hmm And so the thing is that we were a part of the same friend group. So in terms of going out, we maybe didn't have the privacy of it was just the two of us. But then you would have that intimate time. And by intimate, I really just mean that one on one time when it is that those events would end. And as I said, we would literally be sleeping over each other's houses. So that's really where I would say the full extent of the relationship would have blossomed or shown up. Um, it's kind of sad to say, but I honestly don't feel like I went on my first real date until I was in my late 20s. And for somebody who was dating from the age of 17, and let's say I went on my first date at 27,
Right.
that's a 10-year period. And it's because, again, it comes down to you analyzing the space that you're in and
Hmm.
accepting less than. And it wasn't even conscious. It was just that unconscious thing that you knew you just had to keep in, you know?
Right. Did you always find yourself protecting yourself just so you wouldn't be found out by the masses? Not that you necessarily cared to that degree, but you had to protect yourself because, we as people in the LGBT community, especially in the Caribbean, if it's one thing to not say it out publicly, but when you do, there's that fear of being attacked or being shunned. So how did you protect yourself in that space?
And it's funny that you ask if I used to protect myself, because I feel like that's a trait that has followed me through because of that experience. I feel like even now I still protect myself, which is such a weird thing because I share my story now on so many different platforms. But I find myself consciously having to tell myself it's okay to open up. It's okay to tell your story. Um, but back then, yes, I definitely had to protect myself. And the less I shared, the more protected I felt. And it didn't have to be about my relationship. I just didn't
Right.
share anything. You know,
Right.
I was everybody's listening ear.
Yes.
And I kept myself extremely busy. I knew everybody else's story, but I don't think anybody knew mine past the surface. And it's very easy to hide certain things behind a smile. And
You
I
you are
feel like
preaching to the choir. You
so
you literally, it sounds like my story. I mean, I did the same thing. So, I identify, and people get on me for this, but this is my truth. I identify as a bisexual man. I dated women, and I dated one other man previously a long time ago. Um, but I realized that my way of hiding was keeping myself busy. I used to travel extensively. I kept myself buried in like my photography, my regular work, and that was a way so people wouldn't question, well, why aren't you married? Why don't you have kids? I got that when I was in my 20s a lot. But I just kept saying, I didn't find the right person. And, it's so unfortunate because I probably blocked myself from a lot of blessings in my early 20s because of the fact that I was protecting myself. And you don't realize that you're closing yourself off from so many different opportunities because you're trying to hide one aspect of your life. And that one little small aspect is really huge when you really think about it. And you close yourself off to so many different things. And not until, I met Ronald and we started dating did I realize what I had missed out almost 20 something years of my life or even more. Um, And, I think you had the same story. You said it between 17 and 27, you know, 10 years had passed, and, you lived this life where you feel as though you weren't really being who you were authentically meant to be, you know? So let's fast forward to 27, when as though you felt as though you had your first date and you were able to kind of be yourself. Talk about that experience and what it meant to you to be able to just live authentically.
Mhm. So at 27, going on my first date, because I really had to catch myself after, and I was just like, wow, all those nerves that I had leading up to, wondering, do we go there together? Do we go there separately? And thinking about that at 27, I was like, but why does this feel so strange to me? Because I've had, by this age, a couple boyfriends now. I've been in relationships. I counted myself as successful and very self-sufficient. So why does going out for drinks and dinner seem like such a huge deal in this moment? And that's when I was like, wow, I've never been able to publicly go out with another man and not really care what anybody else is thinking. And even in being there, the waitress coming over, I'm like, I wonder what she's thinking. I caught myself wondering what everybody around me was thinking instead of just focusing on the person in front of me. Um, and as I say, it's just a weird experience to have at 27 when you feel like you're more self assured at that age. But it definitely was a learning experience. And that little bite that I got made me say there is so much more on the other side of the fence that I probably have not experienced because I didn't allow myself to do that. And since that moment, I looked for different things in the people that I was dating after that point. I found people showing them authentic selves
Mm,
extremely attractive, and that became my number one drawing factor for people. So that experience changed who it was that I was attracted to, how it is that I operated in my own life.
hmm.
So then I still put clear boundaries between like work and personal. So
Yes.
at work, I would still very much be that person who doesn't share, that person who just works hard and makes sure that everybody else likes him, helps everybody out if they need it. But then in my personal life, with my tribe, with my friend them, like I would be 100% myself, no matter what
Yeah.
it is that we were. So as much as I was living in Jamaica, um, the people that I hung out with, I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I loved them, they loved me, and this was gay, straight, it didn't matter who it was. At that
Right.
point, if somebody asked me, are you gay? As long as I could tell that it wasn't with ill intent, I was like, yes, I am. What other questions do you have?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as big as that was my first leap to not only fully accepting myself, but also trying to show people who are close to me who you can tell sometimes they're curious. I feel like when people who don't understand your experience are curious, that when they do ask, people find that they're being intrusive. And so it's met with a negative response. Whereas I feel like my way to change the world is by affecting the lives of those closest to me first, because they know Alec. They know Alec for who I am at my core. And that is somebody who is seeking to build the people around me up. And if they've felt that, me being gay shouldn't change that view.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me ask you this. When was when was the first time that you actually let someone, because I don't like to say when you came out the closet, who was that first person you told, and how did that make you feel? Because I remember exactly the moment and who it was that I told and what I felt in that moment.
hmm Okay, well, I'll go back to the most significant person that I told from the jump, because I feel like the first person that most people tell is that gay best friend who you can tell is also gay, but you guys just haven't said. But the most significant one, I would say, is my longtime straight best friend. Like, we've been friends since I was 10. He's a year older than me, straight. And I think we were I was turning 18 at the time, but he was about to go off for university because I was still in community college at the time. And I remember it vividly because his girlfriend already knew actually, but
Okay.
he did not know. And it was because she used to tell me that, he was wondering why we don't hang out as much anymore. And he feels like he's telling me everything that's happening in his life and I'm not telling him anything. So he felt like he was losing me and he was hurt by that. And because he was going off to university, I was just like, I know we're not going to see each other as often anymore. So I need to tell him. And we were at the beach. It was a beautiful day at the beach. And I remember when I told him, he just started backing away. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what I was fearing the most.
Yeah.
And the worst part is that his parents were going to be the ones to drop me home. So you can imagine that next hour was
Wow.
super awkward. But after I got him to calm down, I was just like, do you have any questions? And that has still got to be one of the most awkward situations I've ever been in. He asked me a few questions and I just answered him as honestly as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point, we had a little bit of tension for a couple weeks, but then things got back to normal, or at least seemingly back to normal. The funny thing is that when we moved forward, the awkwardness really was from me more so than it was from him, because I could tell at a certain point that he got over everything. But if I accidentally touched him, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm sorry. And that was just because I didn't want him to feel like I was ever trying to come on to him, or that was anything more than the brotherly love that we had. So it's funny how in that experience that he was able to get over it, and it took me a really long time to actually feel comfortable interacting with him again.
Well, it's kind of funny you say that, because I feel as though a lot of times people in the LGBT community, we're the ones that put these restraints and this pressure on ourselves to make sure that everyone else around us is comfortable, but don't give ourselves that grace to be comfortable with who we are and being in spaces with everyone. I totally get where you're coming from. Unfortunately, that was the initial reaction, but I'm sure that once the initial shock wore off, he was okay, but you had to come to terms with the fact that, all right, now you've let someone in, and how do you navigate that space? It can be difficult. But like I said, I think we put more of the pressure on ourselves. I think the people that we surround ourselves with will surprise us, because they know our heart and who we are to our core. They're going to love us regardless. That's been my experience since I let people in several years ago. And I know that this is, your experience as well. Let's fast forward, from dating, from being able to be out in public and just having the courage to say, not necessarily to say, but just be proud to be with someone out in public, to when you met your now husband. Give us what happened in between that and what led up to that moment.
To us being together, or to us actually coming out?
You meeting, being together, and then publicly coming out, because the way that you came out, or like I said, let people in, was very dramatic. So I want people to hear this story.
Okay. So I initially messaged Brian in 2019. It slid in the DM, and it was met to no real response. I just got a double tap on the comment. I remember he was wearing a mesh marina, which, like, if anybody has ever seen any stereotypical picture of a Jamaican, it's in reggae colors with the holes in there and everything. So I saw him wearing that and I was like, oh, okay, because I had seen this guy on my Instagram before, but when I saw that, I was like, I wonder, is he Jamaican? Does he have Jamaican lineage? Because that just added to the attraction for me. Of course, got the double tap, no response. I was just like, oh, okay. I was gonna unfollow and block him because I was so shame. I was so shame. But then a year later, pandemic, lockdown. Clearly, everybody is bored and can go back in their old messages. No, I'm joking. He didn't do that. But I had bought my apartment at the beginning of 2020, and I didn't get my keys until June. posted a picture, and apparently he commented on the picture, and I did not respond.
Oh,
So then I posted a story when it is that I was actually staying in the place, and he commented on that. Saw his message, and I was like, "Hey, Mr. Double Tap."
wow.
So the little petty part of me,
Mm-hmm.
that's how I answered, and we spoke the entire night. And when I say entire night, like, we probably got off the phone. We started talking at 11. We moved from Instagram to WhatsApp, and then we came off the phone maybe at 5 something, almost 6, and then I had to get up at 7 to go to work. Yeah, and I mean, that was the day that started everything. Mind you, he's living in Florida, I'm living in Jamaica. Jamaica's borders at that time was still closed, so he wanted to come and meet me, couldn't. And the minute Jamaica's borders opened in August, Brian was on one of the first flights to Jamaica to meet me. We spent a week together, and at that point I was just like, I know that I am in love. This is the one.
Yeah. Yeah. So you met online. A couple months later, he flies down to Jamaica.
Not even a couple. That's like 6 weeks later.
Okay, sorry. 6 weeks later, he flies down to Jamaica. You spend a week together, and then you realize, all right, this is it. Because listen, I know that feeling. I know that. And what do you start thinking in your mind? Because, like, all right, now mind you, you are kind of out in Jamaica. Certain people, your friends know. Family
Friends know, onlookers suspect.
Right. But family doesn't necessarily know. Now you have this person in your life where you realize that you're in love with this person. You see a future with this person. How are you going to navigate this space? What happens after that?
And, looking back, I don't feel like in that moment I had any kind of foresight. That was not a question, a concern for me, any at all, until it became a concern. So we started talking in July. We met each other in August. By December, we were engaged. So he proposed on Christmas Day, and at this point, he actually met my mother the day that we met in person. So, because when he came to visit, I was staying at my apartment in Mobay. I really live in Kingston. So my mother asked me to come and pick up something from her. So he actually met my mother the same day that I picked him up from the airport. So he had seen her each time that he would come, and we stayed in Montego Bay. So he had met her a couple times by then. I think he probably didn't meet my father until Christmas Day. So he proposed before we went to Christmas dinner, and then we had Christmas dinner with all of my immediate family. And at that point, I'm the only person who brought anybody home.
All right, so talk about that Christmas dinner.
So dinner was fine, and it was like, there was nothing about it that stood out until I had given Brian a silver band that had the day that we started talking on it. And I had a matching one. I didn't wear the ring, of course. 1, the ring didn't fit. Two, I was just like, maybe this is not the best way to like show up to Christmas dinner with a ring on and then have those questions. But my sister saw the silver band, and she saw that both of us were wearing one. And she was like, oh, what's that? And I said to her, and this is by the dinner table, I was like, oh, this is a gift I gave to Brian. And she was like, oh, bro love. And when she said that, I don't know what in me just hurt so much to be like, why did this have to be bro love? Could it not be something else? And if it were something else, is that less than? So that's the first time that I really did feel as triggered as I did by somebody assuming that my partner wasn't my friend,
Right.
or was my friend. And I sat on that for a couple of days, and then I told Brian, like, I am gonna tell her that I didn't love what she just said. I'm gonna tell her. And that's the first person in my family that I came out to.
And how did that go?
It actually went very well. one of the things that stand out to me most in what she said is that she feels as though she was robbed of the opportunity to be a better sister, because she had never looked at me as having a sexuality that she, and in her saying that she looking at my experience like I was asexual, I knew what she meant. It's like, you don't think about your siblings in that way or people in your family in that way. But to hear that in everything that I said, she was like, wow, I wish I could have given you more support growing up. Because at this point, I was, 29? Yeah, I was 29. So there are so many years and we were so close growing up.
Right.
So what stood out for her is that she wished that she could have given me more support during that time. And that really encouraged me to feel like it was okay to then take the next step and tell the other members of my family. It took a couple more weeks for me to muster up the courage to do that. But at this point, I knew time was running out, because after we got engaged, we started the immigration process very shortly after, maybe a couple of days later. And I didn't want that when things started coming through, that at that point I hadn't already shared my story with those closest to me.
Right. So tell us the story of how you told like your mom and your other brother and your dad, and then also how you basically told the world.
So after my sister, next person was gonna be my mom. And I don't remember what it was, but I remember I was in Kingston and I was like, I need to tell her in person. I don't want to tell her over the phone or via text, because that's what I told my sister. So I drove to Montego Bay, which is like 3 hours away from Kingston. And I remember I was heading there and I was just like, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to stop anywhere before I reach her. I'm just going to go straight to the house. Went to the house and, I just asked her if she can just sit down because I want to talk to her. And yeah, I started with, do you remember Brian? She was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, we're actually engaged. And so I never even went into we're in a relationship. I'm just like, we're engaged. And she was just like, okay. And I was like, and we've started the immigration process and I'm gonna be moving. And she was like, okay. I could tell that she just didn't know how to respond. But after giving her a moment, she was like, I always knew already, or I always questioned. I was just waiting for you to confirm.
Oh boy, yeah, I get that, and I'm right there with you. You just brought me back to my story, which I'll tell on another episode. But yeah, I can fully, I know the feeling. I know the feeling. So after that, you tell your mom, you tell the rest of the people in your family.
I actually didn't tell the rest of the people in my family.
Oh, you didn't?
By the following day, because I was intending to tell my brother the following day, I get a message from my mother. She was like, I created a WhatsApp group. And I was like, who's in the WhatsApp group?
I remember the story now.
So like my aunts and uncles from the US, she told my brother, she told my grandmother. And I was just like, Lord lady, you couldn't give me a minute so I could go through and tell whoever. So I did tell some of my cousins who I know wasn't included via message, just because I knew that their parents would have known, and these are cousins that I grew up with and was close to, but I was never worried about them. So that was all met with a good response. She also did tell my father, and I think that this is the only part of my story where it was met with some kind of tension. So in her telling my father, of course, I could feel where things had changed since then. I feel like we were never the closest growing up. And a huge part of that is because I knew that just based on sexuality, we're two different people. Because my father is that stereotypical machismo, very masculine Jamaican man, country born and raised Jamaican man. So
I know.
I knew for him it was going to be a lot to digest, and it took, I would say months. And months in that, it took months for me to feel like things were normal when Brian would be around with us by the house. our relationship didn't necessarily improve by that time. But I think now that significant time has passed, that we're at this point of we respect each other, we love each other, and that's something that doesn't need to be said. He knows who I am, and there is no part of me that I hide.
That's awesome, and that's all you can ask for, to be honest with you. So fast forward
Just a few months now.
Yeah, because for those that don't know, if you're not following on YouTube, Meet the Maslins is an amazing YouTube channel where they document their journey, their love story, and I'll let Alec tell the rest of the story and how the world found out.
So I came out to my mom in February, and in June/July, I visited Brian because we decided we were gonna do engagement pictures. Shout out to Sydney Moorman because she took some amazing photos. And honestly, if it weren't for those photos, I don't think that we would be where we are right now. But took some photos with this awesome plane, and she brought the vision to life. And then, of course, it was shared by Black Gay Weddings, and from Black Gay Weddings sharing it, I know that they've gated certain territories from being able to see the picture, but then it was picked up by another Instagram page who then reshared it. And when that Instagram page reshared it, people in Jamaica started seeing it, people in other Caribbean countries started seeing it, and then it was being sent around. By this time, I was back in Jamaica. I was still working and everything. And I could tell that walls were closing in on me. And I was like, if this is going to go out, I want it to go out on my terms.
Right. You want to control the narrative.
Exactly. So I was approached by the LGBTQ+ advocacy group in Jamaica, Equality JA, and they asked if they could share the story. And I told them you can share it as long as I can give what the caption is going to be. And why that was so important for me is because if this was going to be shared, I wanted to make sure that for the eyes who saw it and could feel what I feel, that it was a point of inspiration for them to know that no matter where it is that you come from, whatever your experience is, that you are very much deserving of love. And once that picture was posted, I remember it was so still for the first 30 minutes. I got no messages from anyone, nothing. And the minute the first person called, they were just like, Alec, everybody is blowing up my phone asking if I've seen this picture. And then another friend called, told me the same thing. And I was just like, okay, I need to say something. So I posted in my story. I shared a huge part of me today in the hope that it allows somebody else going through the same thing to know that they're worthy of love. And the minute I did that, hundreds of DMs on Instagram, hundreds. I think on my final count, I had received 300 and something messages. And that was from people in Jamaica, people from the Caribbean, people from all over. And it was people with different experiences, persons who identified as gay, people who had relatives that were gay, straight people who were just happy for me to be able to live in my truth. And of course, the negative comments were there, but it didn't really come from people that mattered to me.
Right.
So I was pretty okay with that. My mother wasn't happy that I did that though. She wasn't happy at all. And I really do understand the reasoning behind that, because she grew up in a time where, as you said, it was dangerous to be gay. It was dangerous to be associated with being gay. You didn't need a confirmation, And the scary part about it is that even in present day, as liberal as I feel like the country is getting, if a gay man goes missing, it's not a headline.
Yeah.
It's almost like that person didn't exist, and that is still a very scary reality, as much as there has been improvement. But that experience really changed me, because in me coming out in that way, I can finally say at that point that I felt 100% free. And it was the first step to actually figuring out who the real Alec is.
Yeah, I totally get it. And, listen, I don't care what anyone says. It takes so much courage for you to do it in the manner in which you do, because, no one ever chooses to be like a public figure or to put all their business on Front Street. But I think that, when you did that, you allowed so many other people to say, hey, there's someone else out there that's just like me. I don't have to be afraid of who I am. I don't have to be afraid to be myself and just to live in my truth. And that was one of the things that attracted me to yours and Brian's story initially, and even reaching out to you guys to do that Valentine's Day um, live on Instagram, and to be able to do this on such a level. And then, yes, you did this couple of years ago. You basically brought the world in and showed them who you were, but you continue to do that on a weekly basis. You guys put out a YouTube video every Sunday at noon that showcases your life, your love, your journey through life, and the whole journey of the process of meeting, um, relocating to another country, starting a new life together, and navigating um, different spaces and places. In addition to that, people, Alec is also a stepfather. He's a father. Brian had a child from a previous relationship, and you guys are living a true family life. What does it mean for you to come into something like this, and to also not just live it and experience it on your own, but to let other people in and experience it with you?
It it's so funny because I feel like the fact that we had eyes watching, it forced us to be not just honest with them, but honest with ourselves in an amazing way, because you have so many people holding you accountable. People will comment on things that you probably didn't see, whether in your behavior or how it is that you address your partner, and it really causes you to kind of look at yourself from the outside and be like, how can I improve on certain things? So funny enough, letting in people has been such a therapeutic and transformative thing, just because I feel like it gives us a different view of our relationship. And it's so validating at the same time, because we've heard from so many different people, gay, straight, different countries, from the US, from Europe, from Asia. And to know that no matter the language, no matter the border, that one thing that's extremely apparent to people is the love that we have for one another is amazing. Because it's not because we say I love you. That's it. It's not in words. It's in simple actions that people are able to pick this up. And I'm happy that they're able to see that, and not just see it, but feel it too, and know that that's the feeling that they're looking for when they're looking at their own experience as well. Going through all of those things on camera, it has been difficult at times, just being real. Like, some of these things, before I'm even able to fully process it myself, it's already out there in the metaverse, and shared with everyone. And it makes it a little difficult, because at certain points I've felt like I've had to put on a brave face. But then you also realize that there's beauty in the vulnerability. And it's being for them to be able to see me in my most vulnerable stages also lets them know within their personal lives that, hey, everything is not going to be 100 all the time. You're going to have peaks and valleys, and at the end of the day, that's okay. But people sharing their stories as well has helped both of us tremendously. So if I could do it all over again, I definitely would.
Well, that's awesome. What do you want to leave people with? What has this whole experience meant to you? Being able to share not even just your life, but just your personal journey. Because this is something that's can be very private. But like I said, you're doing it on a public forum. And I'm sure people reach out to you all the time saying, thank you so much for doing this, because you're allowing me to be who I am. I gained courage by watching you and seeing how you navigate through the world. What does it mean to you when people reach out to you?
As I say, it's very difficult to put into words, because the minute that you say when people reach out to me, names just start popping in my head. And these are people that I've whether had the pleasure of meeting in person, like yourself, or people that I know nothing about other than a screen name. But for perfect strangers, essentially, to be able to say such uplifting things, I find that that's something that so many of us walk through daily life and have not received much of, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that to me is something that is not owed, and I don't take it for granted.
Okay.
So it feels amazing to have that.
All right. And what is something you can leave with people as we get ready to sign off? What can you tell them? You know, words of encouragement.
Well, what I would say is, first, lead with love. Lead with love. And then next, lead with authenticity. This is 2023, about to be 2024. Like, you need to make sure that when you look back at your life, that there is nothing that you've regret. Know that it's still going to have challenges, you're still going to have problems, but all those things are just setting you up for the win, as long as you are ready to accept that. And the minute you accept yourself wholly is the minute that you open the doors for you to have the best version of your life.
That is amazing. Well said. Alec, my brother, my friend, I thank you so much for this. This has been an amazing talk, amazing experience. I hope that people walk away hearing what you said and gaining some insight, not only into you, but, themselves a little bit, and just giving themselves the freedom to be themselves authentically. One of the things I want to encourage people as they watch this show is to always walk away with that they're learning something about themselves, and just knowing that they can be themselves and be okay with it. It's I'm not going to say it's easy, because I think you have to get over that initial hurdle of all the things that you've built up in your head over these years. Anyone who has had to quote unquote come out the closet or let people in, that hasn't been their authentic selves since the moment they got out of their mother's womb, you have barriers you have to break down within yourselves to be yourself authentically. And when you allow yourself to have the freedom and the space to do that, your life will change immensely. With that being said, again, Alec, thank you so much for being the first guest on the show. I appreciate you. And I'm sure this will not be the last time you'll be on here or on something else with me. But thank you again. I appreciate you, and I look forward to everything that you guys, you and Brian, do collectively and individually. With that being said, I will see you next time. All right. Well, there you have it. That was Alec Mazelin. I will put all of his information down below in the description, so you can go ahead and follow him and follow the Meet the Mazelin's journey. I just want to take this time to say thank you for everyone that's going to watch this show, and I hope that you keep watching every week. So until next week, I will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for watching this show on Indecent Media. Now, if you're watching here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and hit the notification button so that you can get notified when we drop new videos every week. See you guys next time.